Hi everyone, it's Leela with Miss Kiss Kreations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this glittered shimmer peekaboo Halloween scene tumbler. Like always, all of my materials will be listed in my description below, including some links and coupon codes for y'all to use. And don't forget, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for more short videos, tips, and tumbler creations. With all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm using a 30-ounce stainless steel tumbler, and I'm first sanding this tumbler down with a sanding block. I usually use a sanding block of 80 grit to 180 grit. Once I sanded this tumbler down, I then used 91% alcohol and I wiped the entire tumbler down with 91% alcohol. This gets rid of any excess oil or sanding dust that may have been left on the tumbler. I'm adding glitter to my tumbler, and the adhesive that I'm using is Pop of Color paint. The color is dark mint. So I'm adding my glitter to my tumbler using this paint as an adhesive. I'm using Glitter Heart Co.'s Slime Time for my glitter. And what I do is I paint around the tumbler, painting the entire tumbler with the paint, making sure that I'm putting a heavy coat of paint on the tumbler. The reason why I put a heavy coat is because I don't want the paint to dry and I don't want to feel rushed as I'm applying that glitter to my tumbler. Right after I apply that paint on the entire tumbler, I then take the glitter and I pour the glitter around the entire tumbler. If you do have some areas that the paint did dry, go back in with your paintbrush and then paint on some of that green paint again or any other paint you're using, and then add the glitter while the paint is still wet. You do not have to use this method to apply your glitter. This is just the easiest way that I found to apply my glitter with this method. You can always use the Mod Podge method or the epoxy method to apply your glitter to your tumbler. Once I applied my glitter to my tumbler, I allowed my tumbler to dry about 15 to 20 minutes, just allowing that underpaint to dry completely before I went in and I sealed my glitter. I then sprayed one coat of my Krylon Crystal Clear acrylic coating around the entire tumbler, and I let that dry for another 15 to 20 minutes before moving on to epoxying my tumbler. I'm using a total of 40 milliliters of epoxy for my tumbler. That's 20 milliliters part A and 20 milliliters part B, totaling 40 milliliters of epoxy. I am using my Fast Set epoxy, so I let my tumbler spin on its cup turner for about 2 hours. And then I turned off my cup turner and I let my tumbler cure or air dry for another couple hours with a total drying or curing time of 4 to 5 hours. Make sure to read your epoxy's instructions and drying time. It all differs, and it always differs depending on your temperature and your humidity in your room. And once my tumbler's epoxy was cured, I took a 220 grit sanding block and I sanded around my tumbler, not hard. I made sure to sand very light. I'm just sanding away any of those little bubbles that may have been placed on my tumbler from the epoxy, or little pieces of glitter that may be sticking up. Again, make sure you're sanding very light. You do not want to sand away that glitter. I then took an X-Acto knife and I cut around the rim of my tumbler, removing any of that excess cured epoxy. Once I was finished with that, I took my sanding block, I sanded around the rim of the tumbler. Once I was finished with sanding, I then took 91% alcohol and I wiped the entire tumbler, making sure to remove any of that sanding dust or excess oils I may have placed on the tumbler. I then went in Cricut Design Space and I found a lot of Halloween themed characters. So like witches, some cats, pumpkins, ghosts. And then I found these trees without any leaves. So like fall trees. These were all included with my Cricut Access. I measured these to fit around my 30-ounce tumbler, so make sure you're measuring around and then your height. So I measured, my tumbler measures about 7.5 to 8 inches tall. So I make sure to measure the trees and the whole entire design about 7 inches. And then this design measures about 15 inches. Make sure you select all of these designs and you make sure that it's one color. So whenever it does cut out, you only have to use one color vinyl. Once you add your characters to your Cricut design space, sometimes it's like a light black or a dark gray. So I always just make sure that they're one color so I don't get my images or my vinyl confused. It's just easier to cut out a 12 by 12 sheet of vinyl, if that makes sense. So I ended up using some pink vinyl because it was my 631 vinyl or my temporary vinyl. So I did not use permanent vinyl. Make sure you're using temporary. And then I just cut out the entire design on a 12 by 12 sheet of vinyl. And then I weeded the design. Make sure you're doing this very carefully. What I like to do with these big cuts, I either cut the design in like fourths or thirds, or I peel the vinyl and then I cut the excess vinyl with my scissors, because if you place that vinyl accidentally on another piece of vinyl that hasn't been weeded yet, it's going to rip up the entire design, and you'll see I lost a tree by doing that, but it's okay. I had extra trees left over. And then I cut the entire design, just separating those little pieces and those characters so I can weed those little eyeballs and little parts of the tree. I am not a fan of weeding, and this weeding took forever. It probably really only took like 10 minutes, but in weeding time for me, that's like 40 hours. So I do not like this part. So I try to chop it up for y'all so you'd have to watch me weed every single character of my design. And once my vinyl was finally weeded, I took my transfer tape and then I started applying the trees to the tumbler. I made sure to apply all the trees to the tumbler first, and then I added my Halloween characters. So I started at the bottom, obviously, and then I went up to the top, and you can see where my tree line ends. I still wanted some type of sky, but I wanted those trees to be more than 3/4 of the tumbler. I didn't want it to be towards the bottom. I wanted to take up more than half the tumbler. So that was very important for me. But like I always tell y'all, use these tumblers as inspiration and make whichever design you like. Now I did use that same transfer tape. I never try to use my transfer tape only once. I try to use it as many times as I can. So keep that in mind. You can use the same transfer tape, and I placed those trees just next to each other. And then towards the end, I started overlapping those trees, and they actually turned out really cool whenever I spray painted and did the peekaboo effect. One thing to remember whenever you're applying these vinyl pieces down for a peekaboo tumbler is if there's some wrinkles in those tree lines, especially if it's a tree so it doesn't have to look perfect, don't worry about those wrinkles. The most important part about this design is that vinyl is pressed down. It's very secure on the tumbler. So you're going to see whenever I'm finished applying all these decals to the tumbler that I'm going to take my squeegee tool, and I'm also going to press down with my hands to make sure that the vinyl is placed, because when I go to spray paint this tumbler, I don't want that spray paint creeping underneath that vinyl, no pun intended. So I want to make sure that vinyl is completely placed on that tumbler, so when I peel up this vinyl when I'm finished spray painting, it has a nice crisp look. And I really just placed these characters and vinyl around the tumbler wherever I decided to place them. I didn't keep it as the same design as I did on Cricut Design Space. The only thing I left the same was that spider hanging from the tree and with the cat trying to paw at it. I thought that was really cute, so I wanted to keep it the same. Other than that, I just placed the vinyl on the tumbler until I ran out of vinyl. And here's all the vinyl placed on my tumbler. Guys, trust the process. This is gonna turn out great. I used 3 paint colors, black, purple, and orange. It did not matter if it was a satin, gloss, or matte finished. I grabbed whichever colors I had on hand, whichever brand, and whichever finish. Again, it does not matter. Grab the colors. If you have a darker orange, a lighter purple, go with whatever makes your heart happy. So I took my tumbler outside and I just spray painted this tumbler with all 3 different colors in one sitting. So you'll see I started with my orange, I then grabbed my purple, I think, yes, and then I grabbed my black. So I did this by spraying the tumbler in small little spurts or bursts of spray paint. And my only concern about spraying this was to cover up that green glitter. So I sprayed this tumbler until that green glitter was no longer able to be shown on the tumbler. And yes, I know I should have taped off the inside of my tumbler. I completely forgot, so I always recommend taping the inside of the tumbler just to save that cleanup process at the end. But I was so excited to spray paint this tumbler. So you'll see I'm spraying with that black. Spraying with the black spray paint really did cover up that green glitter. So I sprayed a lot of that and then I went back in with my purple and orange and it turned out really, really cool. I then took my black spray paint and I kind of spritz it. So I pressed it down like halfway and it gave it a kind of cool, like a dark night effect and like flaky. So that turned out really well. So if you guys kind of know what I'm talking about, to spray it halfway and spritz it, it looked really, really pretty. Make sure you let your tumbler sit about 20 to 25 minutes until your spray paint is completely dry before moving on to the next step. And now to remove the decals from the tumbler. Do keep in mind whenever I remove my decals from my peekaboo tumbler, I make sure to only wait a maximum of like a couple hours because I don't let my spray paint dry completely. So I don't wait 24 hours because I've learned that the longer I let my spray paint dry, the harder it is to peel up that vinyl because that spray paint is kind of acting like an adhesive and it's sticking down that vinyl. So I make sure to do it after about 20 to 25 minutes after spray painting my tumbler. I use my weeding tool to help me with peeling up the vinyl. And whenever I'm peeling up that vinyl with my weeding tool, I'm making sure to use that pick. And whenever I pick at the vinyl, I'm picking towards my vinyl and I'm not picking towards the spray painted design. That way, if my finger slips or my weeding tool slips and I accidentally scrape that spray paint, I'm scraping on that vinyl and I'm not scraping the design, messing up the tumbler. This is when your tumbler starts to come to life. You can really see that lime green or slime time glitter against those dark colors, and it's starting to look really cool and spooky and Halloweeny. So make sure you're taking your time whenever you're lifting up this vinyl because you don't want to scrape your tumbler, you don't want to scrape that spray paint. So truly take your time because it is so worth it whenever you see the final result of this tumbler. And here's the tumbler when the vinyl has been removed from the tumbler, and these colors go so well together. It looks so cute already. And whenever you go to epoxy, you do not have to seal anything. So after this step, we're going straight into epoxy in the tumbler. Now to epoxy my tumbler, I'm using a total of 30 milliliters of epoxy. That's 15 milliliters part A and 15 milliliters part B, totaling 30 milliliters of epoxy. I also decided to add some mica powder from Glitter Heart Co. I am using the color Wishful. This is such a gorgeous mica powder. If you do not have mica powder on hand, you can always add some transparent white glitter or something like that. So mica powder is basically, in my opinion, a loose eyeshadow. That's the only way I can compare it. And you only need a little bit of mount inside of your epoxy cup or your epoxy mixture to have your tumbler really sparkle. You're going to see my tumbler really come to life whenever I add this epoxy to the tumbler and whenever it's cured on the design. If you are using mica powder or even glitter in your epoxy mix, make sure you're stirring very well whenever you add that additive into your epoxy, because you don't want your tumbler to be streaky. So make sure you are mixing very well so you can have one nice consistency. And then I'm adding that epoxy to my tumbler, just like I would if there wasn't any additive to my tumbler. And you can see how much sparkle that adds to the cup, and it makes it almost look like a night starry sky, if that makes sense, or a sky starry night. Yes, I think that's what it is. So I added that epoxy to the tumbler, and then this is also my fast set epoxy again. So again, that 5-hour drying time. Once I applied that and I added that fast set epoxy, I then put another 15 milliliters of epoxy over this coat just to seal in that mica powder. And if you are using glitter, I recommend doing that as well. So doing this, adding that epoxy, letting it cure, and then adding my final coat of just clear epoxy, the 15 milliliters of epoxy, and letting that cure before we go and clean up the inside of the tumbler. Once my second coat of epoxy was cured on the tumbler, I took my X-Acto knife for the last time, and then I clean up the rim of that tumbler, removing any of that excess epoxy. And then I'm taking my 100% acetone and I'm cleaning out the inside of my tumbler. This removes the paint from the inside. Once I do this, I take my tumbler to my sink and then I wash my tumbler out with my Dawn dish soap. Make sure you're doing that to remove that acetone from the inside. And then I'm adding my lid to my tumbler, and my tumbler is good to go. Look at that shine. That mica powder really just put that nice finish and touch on this tumbler. This is such a cute tumbler, and I cannot wait until I see what you guys create using this inspiration. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.